Dr. Jax Cormorant had the kind of face that could get punched in the dark and never see it coming. Not because he deserved it, mind you, but because his perpetual expression of detached bemusement suggested he was always somewhere else, preferably a universe where people didn't feel inclined to punch him. It was a useful skill in his line of work at the Nexus, that cosmic gateway where reality took a long drag from a cigarette and decided to see just how weird things could get. Naya Quora, on the other hand, was about as approachable as a cactus with a toothache. She sat across from Jax in their shared lab, a sterile box filled with blinking terminals and enough security protocols to make a paranoid android blush. Her eyes flicked over data streams, the numbers flowing like toxic poetry. "You know," she said, not looking up, "people used to dream of immortality. Now we've got it and nobody knows what the hell to do with it." Jax smirked, a small, lopsided grin that suggested he'd read the manual to life and decided it was more fun to improvise. "Dreams are like that," he said, leaning back in his chair until it creaked in protest. "Great until you actually get what you want. Then the complaining starts." Naya snorted, half amused, half disgusted. "Yeah, hey, well, we used to dream of flying cars too. Now we just have really fast death traps with wheels." Their banter was cut short by the door swishing open, the sound as irritatingly clinical as the rest of the place. In walked Captain Reeve, the sort of military man who'd seen things no one should and survived to grumble about it. He had the presence of someone who could wrestle a black hole and come out the other side with a new scar and a lousy story. "You two still trying to figure out if we're gonna live forever or just long enough to really screw things up?" "Both," Jax replied, sitting up straight but not bothering to look properly attentive. "It's the paradox of human progress, Captain. We want to live forever but can barely handle today." Reeve grunted, which was about as close to agreement as he got. "Well, while you're contemplating the big questions, I've got a small one. How the hell do we stop people from going nuts with all this virtual immortality crap?" Naya finally looked up, her gaze sharp enough to cut through the bravado filling the room. "That's the thing, Captain. Unpredictability is the human condition. You give someone eternity and they might just figure out new ways to mess things up. Or," Jax added helpfully, "they could get bored and, I don't know, learn knitting." Reeve didn't laugh. "I'm more worried about the ones who decide to become intergalactic warlords or politicians," Naya said, deadpan. Jax snapped his fingers. "Same thing, really." The captain shook his head, a bemused smile breaking through his gruff exterior. "I swear if I didn't know better I'd think you two were working for the other side." "What side is that exactly?" Naya asked, her curiosity genuine. "The side that doesn't need a drink to get through a damn Tuesday," Reeve replied, turning to leave. "Keep me posted. And try not to blow up the lab this time." Jax watched him go, then turned back to Naya, a question hanging in the space between them. "Do you think we should tell him about the glitch we found?" She shrugged, her fingers dancing over the keyboard once more. "Why ruin his day? I mean, it's not like a minor system error in the Nexus could possibly lead to catastrophic universal collapse." "Right," Jax agreed, nodding sagely. "Let's save that for Friday." The Nexus wasn't just any wormhole. It was the wormhole, the kind scientists only dreamed of when they were high on their own genius. A crossroads of realities where the rules of physics took a backseat to the whims of whatever cosmic joker was in charge. Here, virtual immortality was less a gift and more a looming existential crisis. Because when you can live forever, what the hell do you do with your time? Naya had theories, of course. She always did. "Most likely," she said as if continuing a conversation that had been paused, "people will get complacent." "And then," Jax prompted, already knowing the answer but enjoying the way she spelled it out with all the enthusiasm of someone reading a particularly grim bedtime story. "Then," she replied, her voice as dry as the Martian surface, "they'll start looking for ways to spice things up. Wars, plagues, reality TV. The usual." Jax chuckled, a short, sharp sound. "Every silver lining has a cloud, huh?" "Exactly. and Iors might just reign on the whole damn universe. They worked in silence for a while, the hum of the lab equipment a comforting white noise against the existential dread that was their constant companion. At the Nexus, the improbable was probable, and the impossible just hadn't been tried yet. Here, immortality was less a dream and more a daily chore. "You ever think," Jax said suddenly, breaking the silence, "that we're just playing at being gods?" Naya paused, considering. "Nah," she said finally. "Gods have better hair." Jax laughed, the sound echoing around the sterile room like a forgotten secret. "So, what do we do in the meantime?" "Same thing we always do," Naya replied, her fingers once again dancing over the keyboard. "Try not to let the universe implode." It was as good a plan as any, Jax supposed. But in a place like the Nexus, where immortality was a given and predictability was a joke, even that might be asking too much. The lab was quieter than usual, a sign that even the machines were contemplating their meaningless existence. "Doctor," Jax Cormorant leaned over one of the blinking terminals, his fingers dancing over the touchpad like a pianist at a particularly grim recital. "You know," he remarked, "if these computers ever gain sentience, the first thing they'll do is file for early retirement." Naya Quora didn't even look up from her screen. "If they were smart, they'd demand hazard pay first." Jax chuckled, a sound that seemed to sync with the hum of the equipment. "So, any new disasters on the horizon?" "Just the usual," Naya replied dryly. "Universal collapse, the end of all things, and the coffee machines out of order. Priorities," Jax said with a mock solemnity. As they sifted through the data streams, an endless parade of numbers that could make even the bravest of souls weep, little anomalies began to pop up like cockroaches under a kitchen light. A glitch here, a blip there. Harmless on their own, but together, a symphony of impending doom. "Look at this," Naya said, pointing at a data spike that shouldn't exist, much like teenagers' love for ancient memes. Jax leaned in, squinting at the numbers. "That looks unsettlingly like a quantum instability." "Quantum instability," Naya repeated, tasting the words like they were laced with arsenic. "Sounds like marketing came up with it." "Let's call it what it is," Jax said. "A cosmic bug that could eat us alive from the inside." "Charming." They exchanged a glance that spoke volumes, the kind of volumes that were usually found in the self-help section titled, "How Not to Die Horribly." "Think this has to do with the immortality experiments?" Jax ventured, his tone almost too casual for comfort. "Everything's got to be related to that crap," Naya said, closing one screen to open another. "You give people eternity and they start poking around where they shouldn't. Curiosity killed the cat," Jax offered. "And immortality killed curiosity," Naya shot back. "Except when it doesn't, and then we get this mess." Their banter was interrupted by the door swishing open again. Captain Reeves strolled in, his presence as subtle as a meteor strike. "What's the latest? You two figure out if we're going to end up as eternal gods or just eternal idiots." "Neither," Jax replied, gesturing at the screen. "More like eternal guinea pigs." Reeve raised an eyebrow, a feat of engineering given his usually gruff demeanor. "That bad, huh?" "Worse," Naya said, pushing back her chair. "The Nexus is showing signs of destabilization. If it goes, we all might as well start writing our own obituaries." Reeve didn't blink, a testament to his lifetime of facing down both the absurd and the appalling. "What kind of instability are we talking about? The kind that makes your coffee taste funny, or the kind that swallows galaxies?" Jax shrugged, feeling the weight of existential dread settle comfortably like an old coat. "Could be both, but right now it's more like a cosmic migraine that could turn into an aneurysm." Reeve nodded, taking it all in with the practiced air of someone who'd long ago resigned himself to humanity's capacity for screwing things up. "And what do we do about it?" "We could start by not using the Nexus like a toy," Naya suggested, her sarcasm as sharp as a scalpel. "But then that might be asking too much." "Humans and caution," Jax said with a laugh. "Name a more iconic duo." Reeve considered them for a moment, his eyes narrowed like he was trying to solve a particularly annoying puzzle. "All right, you two, keep digging." Figure out if this instability is going to be a minor inconvenience or the end of reality as we know it. As the captain left, Jax and Naya exchanged another loaded glance. Well, Jax said, at least it's never boring. Yeah, Naya agreed. Too bad it's also never safe. Back at the terminal, Jax's fingers resumed their dance. He wasn't sure whether he was trying to solve the puzzle or merely delay the inevitable. You think people will ever stop trying to play God? Naya laughed, a short, humorless sound. Not unless they get bored of being human, which, let's face it, might happen sooner than we think. The lab's lights flickered, as if the universe itself was winking at them, an acknowledgement of their futile little dance. The data streams continued to flow, the numbers like rivers of doubt, casting shadows that grew longer and darker with each passing moment. Okay, Jax said, pulling up another set of readings. Let's see if we can pinpoint where this instability is coming from. Naya nodded, her focus sharp as ever. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack. A haystack that's on fire. But we're nothing if not persistent, Jax quipped, his voice tinged with irony. Persistent or just too stubborn to know when to quit, Naya countered. Hours passed, marked by the rhythmic tapping of keys and the occasional cynical comment. At some point, Jax looked up, his eyes bleary from staring too long at the screen. You ever wonder if the universe has it out for us? Naya didn't miss a beat. I think we're more of an afterthought, like them. Yeah, let them muddle through their little crises. Comforting, Jax muttered, though he couldn't suppress a grin. Then an alert pinged, a sharp, insistent sound that cut through the lab's ambient hum like a knife. They both stared at the screen, which now displayed a new anomaly, data fluctuations spiking wildly like a seismograph recording an impending quake. Well, that can't be good, Jax said, his voice the picture of understatement. Naya leaned in, her eyes narrowing. Looks like the Nexus is having a tantrum. What kind of tantrum? Jax asked, not really wanting to know the answer. The kind that could unravel the fabric of space, Naya replied, her tone perfectly at odds with the severity of her words. Jax sighed. Guess we better tell Reeve. The captain arrived with a speed that belied his age and cynicism. All right, lay it on me. How screwed are we? On a scale of 1 to we never should have left Earth, Jax asked, earning a dry chuckle from Naya. Reeve didn't look amused. Just give it to me straight, Naya obliged. The instability is spreading. If we don't contain it, the Nexus might turn from a cosmic gateway into a cosmic blender, and we're the fruit. Reeve grunted. Options. Hope and prayer, Jax suggested, though he was only half joking. Or, Naya interjected, we could try recalibrating the whole system. But if we make one wrong move, it could accelerate the collapse, Jax finished for her. Reeve rubbed his temples as if trying to massage away the headache that was their life. And the kicker, Jax said with a mirthless smile, is that this might be tied to the immortality tech. People living forever could be what's tearing the fabric apart. Of course it is, Reeve said, shaking his head. It's always the thing that's supposed to save us that ends up being our downfall. The room fell silent, each of them lost in their own grim thoughts. Here they were, standing on the precipice of annihilation, all because someone couldn't leave well enough alone. Virtual immortality, a dream turned nightmare in the space of a few lines of code and a lot of human hubris. So, Jax said finally, breaking the silence, do we try to fix it or just hope it fixes itself? Naya leaned back, her expression one of resigned frustration. We're scientists, not magicians, but hell, if the universe wants to play games, let's play. Reeve nodded, his decision made. Start the recalibration. And pray we're not just fiddling while Rome burns. Jax and Naya got to work, a sense of urgency hanging over them like a guillotine. As the recalibration process began, the lab's lights flickered again, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance mockingly around them. Here's to not blowing up the universe, Jax said, as he initiated the process. And here's to surviving another day, Naya replied, though her tone was anything but optimistic. As the Nexus hummed back to life, they watched the readings with bated breath. Numbers shifted, lines corrected, and the chaotic storm of data began to settle into something resembling stability. For now, at least, they were buying time. But whether it was enough time to save them from themselves was anyone's guess. As the process concluded, the tension in the room eased ever so slightly. They exchanged a look that spoke of relief, doubt, and the ever-present specter of what could come next. "Well," Jax said, breaking the moment with a sardonic grin, "that wasn't as disastrous as it could have been." "Yet," Naya added, "because optimism was for people who didn't work at the Nexus." Reeve clapped Jax on the back, an unexpected gesture of camaraderie. "You two did good, but don't get comfortable. There's a long way to go." "Isn't there always?" Jax replied, feeling the weight of the universe settle back onto his shoulders. As Reeve left, Jax turned to Naya. "You know, if we keep doing this, they might just pin medals on us." "Medals made of lead," Naya said, her voice laced with dark humor. "At least they'll match our sense of impending doom." Jax laughed, though it was a tired sound. "Here's to human ingenuity." "And human stupidity," Naya replied, both of them sharing a moment of rueful acknowledgement. They returned to their stations, the lab humming with a life of its own. The Nexus, for now, was stable, but the questions of immortality, humanity, and their place in the cosmos lingered like ghosts. It was a temporary reprieve in a universe that offered little in the way of certainty. But then, if it were easy, it wouldn't be any fun at all. "Jax, you ever notice how every time we think we've hit rock bottom, someone hands us a shovel?" Naya asked, staring at the latest wave of data streaming across the terminal. The Nexus had gone from a cosmic gateway to a cosmic funhouse, and they were stuck in the middle of the ride. "Yeah," Jax replied, eyes fixed on the blinking screens. "And then someone fires up a jackhammer. Welcome to life as a permanent guinea pig." A fresh wave of anomalies cascaded across the screen, strange fluctuations that suggested the kind of instability even their most pessimistic forecasts hadn't accounted for. Not that they'd ever been optimistic. That was the privilege of people who didn't work at the cutting edge of existential threats. Naya ran a hand through her hair, exasperated. "It's like the Nexus is having a midlife crisis." "More like a quarter-life crisis," Jax corrected. "Hasn't even been around long enough to hit the midlife mark. But hey, immortality's a new game, right?" Naya snorted. "Except in this game, the board's melting." As if to punctuate her point, the Nexus emitted a low rumble, the kind that suggested something somewhere was deeply unhappy. Or maybe it was just mimicking their internal monologues. "All right," Jax said, pulling up a series of contingency protocols. "So, I've got this idea." "Oh, here we go," Naya said, leaning back in her chair. "The last time you had an idea, we ended up with a coffee machine that dispenses existential dread." "That was not my fault," Jax protested, though he couldn't quite hide the grin. "I'm talking about using this whole mess to leverage human unpredictability. You know, fight chaos with chaos." Naya raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a plan built on the foundation of a hope and a prayer." "More like a desperate gamble," Jax admitted. "But look, the Nexus is a mess of predictability right now. I say we throw a little human into the mix. We've been screwing up machines for centuries." "Why stop now?" Naya considered this, her expression shifting to one of reluctant intrigue. "How exactly do you plan to harness our inherent ability to mess things up?" "Easy," Jax said, pulling up a schematic. "We introduce random variables, stuff the Nexus can't predict. Like, say, me." Naya blinked. "You want to dive headlong into the Nexus like a lunatic, like a scientist," Jax corrected, though the distinction was mostly academic. "Great," Naya said. "One small step for a man, one giant leap for suicidal tendencies." Jax shrugged. "You got a better idea," Naya sighed. "No, but then again, I'm not the one volunteering for a cosmic juggling act." "Think of it as a performance," Jax said, pulling up the recalibration interface. "Except if I mess up, we won't have a bad review, just an imploding universe." "Reassuring," Naya replied, drumming her fingers on the desk. "So what do I do while you're playing chaos conductor?" "Keep an eye on the readings. Try to make sense of any patterns." Jax paused, then grinned. And maybe write my eulogy, Naya snorted again. Already got a draft. It starts with "Here lies Jax Cormorant, the man who thought he could outsmart a cosmic blender." As she spoke, the lab's lights flickered ominously. The Nexus was having another one of its fits, the kind that made the hairs on the back of Jax's neck stand at attention. "All right," Jax said, steeling himself. "Let's do this. Patch me into the Nexus." Naya hesitated, a rare moment of genuine concern flickering across her face. "You sure about this, Jax?" "Not even a little," Jax said, his voice steady. "But when has that ever stopped us?" With a resigned nod, Naya initiated the connection. The room hummed with energy, the terminals alive with data. Jax felt the familiar thrill of stepping into the unknown, the kind of reckless abandon that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. As the connection stabilized, Jax found himself enveloped by the swirling chaos of the Nexus. Colors and sounds melded into an overwhelming tapestry, the kind of sensory overload designed to knock reason out and invite madness in for tea. "Jax, you still there?" Naya's voice crackled over the comms, a lifeline in this storm of insanity. "Yeah," Jax replied, focusing on the task at hand. "Feels like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube with a blindfold on in zero gravity." "Just remember," Naya said, her voice laced with the kind of dry humor that kept them sane, "we prefer our universe in one piece." "Working on it," Jax promised, navigating through the chaos with the practiced ease of someone who'd made a career out of impossible odds. The Nexus was a mess, a swirling vortex of conflicting data and unpredictable anomalies. But amidst the chaos, Jax could sense patterns faint and fleeting like shadows in a fog. "Found something," Jax announced, his heart racing. "A stable point. It's weak, but it's there." "Can you lock it down?" Naya asked, her voice a mix of hope and skepticism. "Not yet," Jax said, feeling the weight of the universe pressing down on him. "But I can buy us time." "Time's a hell of a commodity," Naya replied. "Just don't go bankrupt." The Nexus trembled, a seismic shift that rippled through the connection. Jax focused, channeling his attention to the stable point, a pinprick of order in a sea of chaos. "I've got it," Jax said, his voice filled with a mixture of triumph and disbelief. "I've stabilized the core." On the other end, Naya let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "You did it, you crazy bastard." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Jax replied, a grin spreading across his face. "Now, let's get out of here before the universe changes its mind." Disengaging from the Nexus, Jax felt the familiar weight of reality reassert itself, the lab's sterile environment a comforting reminder of normalcy. Or as normal as things ever got around here. As the connection closed, the lab systems hummed back to life, the lights stabilizing as if the universe had decided to grant them a temporary reprieve. "Well," Jax said, leaning back in his chair, "that was fun." "Fun is one word for it," Naya replied, her expression a blend of relief and exasperation. "What's the other word?" "Survival," Jax said, his tone turning serious. "We bought ourselves time, but we're not in the clear yet." "Figured as much," Naya said, her eyes scanning the data for any signs of lingering instability. Jax reached over, patting the side of the terminal. "Think this thing will hold together long enough for us to figure out a permanent fix? If not," Naya said, smirking, "we'll just have to wing it like always." Jax chuckled, though the laughter was tinged with weariness. "Here's to hoping our luck doesn't run out." Naya raised an imaginary glass. "To luck, then. And to surviving another day in the wonderful hellscape we call life." As they settled back into the familiar rhythm of data analysis and sarcastic banter, the looming threat of the Nexus remained ever present, a reminder that their work was far from over. But for now, they had time. And in the universe's twisted sense of humor, that was the only gift they could expect. When you work with cosmic funhouses like the Nexus, you know one thing: it's always open season on sanity. Jax Cormorant was feeling lucky. Or maybe just foolhardy, which was close enough. The Nexus had behaved itself for the past 24 minutes, a new record in the crapshoot they called their workday. But Jax knew better than to get too comfortable. The universe had a nasty habit of flipping the table just when you thought you had the game figured out. I'm starting to think this stability is a setup, Naya muttered, not looking up from her terminal. It's like waiting for the other shoe to drop when you're surrounded by a damn centipede. Jack snorted, glancing at the readouts. Yeah, well, if it's a setup, then someone's about to get a face full of cosmic pie. Their shared gallows humor was interrupted by the lab's comm system chiming with the kind of urgency reserved for emergency meetings and birthday reminders. Jax grimaced, pressing the receive button. Jack's here. Who's ruining my day this time? The face that flickered onto the screen was the ever-grim visage of Counselor Hatton. His expression was the kind of serious that suggested his mother never hugged him enough. Dr. Cormorant, the council is convening in 20 minutes to discuss the ongoing Nexus situation. Your presence is required. Great, Jax replied, the word dripping with sarcasm. I'll bring my dancing shoes. Hatton's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly, which was as close to a smile as he ever got. Be there, Doctor. And bring MS, Quora, Council out. The screen went blank, leaving Jax and Naya exchanging looks of mutual dread. Ever notice how when the council wants a meeting, it's never to give us a raise or a fruit basket? Naya said. Yeah, Jax replied, stretching his arms above his head. It's always something about dire consequences and existential threats, makes you think they could use a thesaurus. Naya shrugged. Well, at least it keeps life interesting. Like juggling flaming chainsaws interesting. The council meeting was held in one of the station's large conference rooms, a cavernous space that managed to be both too large and too small, depending on how many egos were stuffed inside. Jax and Naya took their seats, surrounded by grim-faced officials and a handful of other scientists who looked as though they'd rather be anywhere else. Presiding over the gathering was Counselor Hatton, with a presence that suggested he'd been born wearing a suit and issuing orders. He cleared his throat, a sound like gravel in a blender. We're all aware of the current instability of the Nexus and the potential threats it poses. Someone coughed. Jax didn't bother to look. It was the sort of environment where you didn't want to draw attention unless you were volunteering to be the sacrificial lamb. We've received some troubling intelligence, Hatton continued, his expression settling into a frown deeper than a quantum singularity. There's a faction within our ranks that seeks to exploit the Nexus during this period of instability. Jax raised an eyebrow, exchanging a look with Naya. Let me guess, he whispered. They want to harness chaos. Who doesn't these days? Hatton's gaze landed on Jax, possibly because he'd spoken too loudly, or perhaps because Jax was just the sort of person people naturally looked at when things went wrong. Doctor. Cormorant, your recent efforts to stabilize the Nexus have been noted. We understand you have a plan involving human unpredictability. Jax nodded, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. Yeah, it's a new tactic. We've been successful at messing things up for centuries, so why not put that talent to good use? A murmur of discontent rippled through the room. The kind of noise that said, we don't like it, but we don't have a better idea, Hatton sighed, moving on as if he'd expected nothing less than chaos from Jax. There is also the matter of Elix Van. A collective shiver seemed to pass through the gathering. Even those who didn't know Van personally knew of his reputation. The man was a legend and not the good kind. More the stuff of cautionary tales and do not attempt disclaimers. Van's been advocating for more aggressive measures, Hatton said, his face a mask of distaste. He believes the Nexus can be controlled, used in ways that would benefit only him and his followers. Great, Naya muttered under her breath. Because megalomaniacs never make things worse. Jax leaned back, contemplating the ceiling like it held the answers. So what's the plan? We going to wait for him to make a move, or are we stepping up the game? Hatton's gaze was steel and stone. We need to ensure Van doesn't succeed in his aims. If the Nexus falls into the wrong hands, it could spell disaster for all of us. There was a grim silence, the kind where everyone was thinking about how badly things could go sideways. Finally, Jack spoke up because if there was one thing he excelled at, it was speaking up at the worst possible times. "And what about Van's people?" Jax asked. "Any chance they are open to bribes? A good vacation package, maybe." A few nervous chuckles scattered around the room, but Hatton's face remained impassive. "They believe in his vision. They see the Nexus as the key to reshaping the universe in their image." "Well, that's a comforting thought," Naya said dryly. "Nothing says paradise like a universe run by a guy who thinks empathy is an overrated virtue." Hatton's eyes flicked to Naya, his look inscrutable. "Dr. Cormorant, MS, Quora, your expertise will be crucial. We need a way to safeguard the Nexus while we address this internal threat." Jax nodded, though the weight of responsibility pressed down like a lead blanket. "All right, we'll do what we can, though I suspect it's going to involve a lot of caffeine and late nights." "Just another day at the office," Naya added, brushing a hand through her hair. With the meeting adjourned, Jax and Naya returned to their lab, the weight of the council's expectations hanging over them like a particularly stubborn cloud. "So," Naya said as they settled back into their workstations, "what's our next move? Besides the obvious breakdown in tiers option." Jax tapped his fingers on the terminal, deep in thought. "We need to find a way to keep the Nexus stable while minimizing Van's influence. And maybe figure out how to use his own tactics against him," Naya snorted. "You want to play dirty, huh? Why not?" Jax replied with a grin. "If he wants to use chaos, we'll give him chaos, but on our terms." The lab was quiet, the hum of the machines the only sound as they set about their task. For years they'd worked on the Nexus, unraveling its mysteries and wrestling with its potential. But now, with the stakes higher than ever, they knew they were on the edge of something monumental. It took several hours of calculations, simulations, and more than a few colorful curses, but finally they had something resembling a plan. Jax leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "All right, I think we've got a way to stabilize the Nexus's core long enough to keep it out of Van's hands." Naya leaned over, scrutinizing the data. "This is going to be tricky. We need to ensure the chaos factors align in our favor." "Yeah," Jax agreed, his expression serious. "But if we can manage it, we'll have a fighting chance." As they finalized their plan, a message pinged on Jax's terminal. He opened it, his expression shifting from curiosity to annoyance. "Oh, fantastic." Van's issued a public statement. "Let me guess," Naya said, not bothering to hide her sarcasm. "He's promising peace and prosperity for all if we just hand over the keys to the universe." Jax skimmed the message, his lip curling. "Close enough. He's claiming the Nexus is humanity's birthright and he's the only one who can unlock its true potential." "Well, that's original," Naya said, rolling her eyes. "Does he offer free brainwashing with every membership?" Jax chuckled, shaking his head. "Probably comes with a complimentary tinfoil hat." Their banter was interrupted by another message, this one from Captain Reeve. The man had the kind of voice that could make a drill sergeant sound like a kindergarten teacher. "Jax, Naya, I've got some intel on Van's latest moves. Looks like he's planning something big." Jax sat up straighter, his attention fully captured. "Something big as in we're going to need a bigger gun or we're all screwed." Reeves' reply was grim. "He's gathering his followers. Rumor is he's planning a direct assault on the Nexus." Naya groaned, running a hand down her face. "Perfect. Just what we needed. A front row seat to the ultimate ego showdown." Jax sighed, logging off the call. "Well, I guess our timeline just got a lot shorter." With renewed urgency, they returned to their preparations, the clock ticking down like some malevolent overseer. In the end, it always came down to a race against time, with the fate of everything they knew hanging in the balance. "Jax," Naya said, her voice more subdued than usual. "You really think we can pull this off?" Jax didn't answer immediately, lost in thought as he stared at the flickering screens. "I think," he said finally, "we've got one hell of a shot, and that's more than we had yesterday." Naya smirked, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Here's to making it count, then." As they turned back to their work, the lab was filled with the familiar hum of technology. a quiet reminder of the endless struggle between order and chaos. But for Jax and Naya, it was just another day on the job, surviving in a universe that seemed hell-bent on keeping them on their toes. And if they had anything to say about it, they planned on staying one step ahead. The lab was playing host to a symphony of chaos, and Jax Cormorant had a front-row seat. He slumped in his chair, eyeing the terminal screen as if it had personally offended him. The blinking cursor was the digital equivalent of raising a smug eyebrow. "Well, Naya," Jax drawled, not tearing his gaze away from the screen, "I think we're officially screwed." Naya glanced up from her own terminal, her expression a cocktail of frustration and resignation. "Officially? I thought we passed that milestone when Van decided he wanted to mix hostile takeover with cosmic redecoration." Jax chuckled, though it had a brittle edge. "Yeah, nothing like a megalomaniac with a god complex to make Monday feel even more special." The Nexus was a beast on the verge of breaking its chains, and Alix Van was rattling the cage with an enthusiasm that bordered on pathological. Jack squinted at the data streaming across his screen, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety lodged in his gut. Captain Reeves' holographic face flickered to life on Jax's comm terminal, his expression set in the kind of grim determination you'd expect from a man who'd seen his share of bad days. "Jax, we've got a situation. Van's forces are mobilizing, aiming straight for the Nexus." "Of course they are," Jax replied with a sigh. "Because it's not like we needed another layer of disaster today." Reeves' voice was all business. "We're looking at full-scale conflict if we can't stabilize things. How's that plan of yours coming along?" Jax exchanged a glance with Naya, her face lined with tension. "We're working on it. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like trying to plug a black hole with a Band-Aid." "Just keep at it," Reeve urged. "We're counting on you." The hologram blinked out, leaving the lab to settle back into its disconcerting quiet. Jax rubbed his temples, feeling the pressure of the universe's impending collapse hammering a migraine into his skull. "Any bright ideas, Naya?" She tapped a few keys, watching as numbers that made no sense to anyone outside of theoretical physics scrolled across the screen. "I'm thinking we use Van's own chaos against him. If we can manipulate the Nexus's unpredictability in our favor." "Right," Jax cut in, "because what's a little cosmic roulette when you've got nothing left to lose?" "Exactly," Naya replied, a sardonic grin tugging at her lips. "Besides, it's not like we've got a surplus of sensible options lying around." They dove into their work, fueled by caffeine and desperation. The lab was silent but for the occasional curse as calculations went awry or simulations crashed, each failure driving home just how close to the edge they were. Iors bled into each other, marked only by the dwindling coffee supply and the increasing sense of futility. Jax could feel it, the precarious balance between hope and despair, tipping ever closer to the latter. Naya shook her head, incredulous. "Who'd have thought that immortality would come with an expiration date?" Jax snorted, unable to help himself. "Life's full of surprises, like the fact we're still expected to save everyone's bacon when the universe is clearly out to get us." "I suppose it could be worse," Naya mused. "We could be on Van's side." Touché. It wasn't long before another alert flashed up on Jax's terminal, a priority message from Counselor Hatton. Jax opened it, already anticipating the kind of news that'd make a mortician smile. "Dr. Cormorant," Hatton's voice buzzed through the speakers, "we've got reports of unrest among the population. Van's promises of a brighter future have some people reconsidering their loyalties. Because nothing screams brighter future like a lunatic on a power trip," Jax muttered under his breath. Hatton's message continued, oblivious to the commentary. "We need to act fast. If public sentiment shifts towards Van, it could undermine everything we stand for." Naya sighed. "Fantastic. Just what we needed, a public relations crisis to go along with our impending doom." "So what do we do?" Jax asked, directing the question as much to himself as to Naya. "Well, since most people seem to think unpredictability is a bad thing, maybe we should show them it's our best weapon. Use it to catch Van off guard. Jax nodded slowly, the nugget of an idea forming amidst the chaos. If we can harness human unpredictability, turn it into a strength instead of a liability, we might just pull this off, Naya finished. The plan was audacious, teetering on the brink of madness, but then again, so was everything about their current predicament. They worked in tandem, the hum of the lab machines a backdrop to their frantic pace. As they pieced together their strategy, Jax felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the thrill of the impossible. It was a feeling he knew well, one that had kept him alive in more ways than one. But there was also the lurking fear, the nagging doubt that they might be too late, that their efforts would unravel before they could make a difference. "Hey, Jax," Naya said suddenly, breaking the tense silence. "Remember that time we tried to stabilize that singularity with duct tape and optimism?" Jax laughed despite himself. "Yeah, we almost destroyed the lab. Good times. Let's hope this doesn't end the same way." "Here's hoping," Jax agreed, a smile creeping onto his face despite the odds. "But if it does, at least we'll go out with a bang." Literally, the hours ticked by, each one bringing them closer to the moment of truth. The Nexus loomed over them, its instability a constant reminder of how little separated their plans from disaster. But as they worked, a resolve took root, stubborn and unyielding, fueled by the knowledge that they were humanity's last, best hope. Another alert popped up, this one less alarming in its immediacy but no less significant. The data streams indicated a shift, subtle but unmistakable, in the Nexus's energy patterns. It was a sign that their efforts might not be in vain, that perhaps they'd found the chink in Van's armor. "Look," Naya said, her voice tinged with awe. "The Nexus. It's responding." Jax peered closer, his heart skipping a beat. "We might actually have a shot at this." But before he could get too comfortable, the lab doors slid open with a hiss, revealing Captain Reeve in all his no-nonsense glory. "Jax, Naya, we've got a problem," Jax groaned. "Add it to the list." "What now?" Reeve's grim expression didn't waver. "Van's making his move. His forces are converging on the Nexus, and they've got enough firepower to make us reconsider our career choices." Naya's eyes narrowed. "So it's a race now, is it?" "It always was," Jax replied, steeling himself. "But we're not out yet. We've got a plan, and if we're lucky, it'll be just crazy enough to work." Reeve nodded, the kind of nod that said he wasn't sure if he'd just placed his faith in genius or insanity. "Well, whatever you're planning, now's the time to pull it off. We'll do what we can to hold them back." With a salute that was more solidarity than formality, Reeve strode out, leaving Jax and Naya to face the monumental task ahead. Jax took a deep breath, the reality of what they were about to attempt settling over him like a shroud. "Ready?" Naya grinned, though her eyes held a steely resolve. "Ready as I'll ever be. Let's go save the universe." And with that they set to work, their fingers flying over the controls as they initiated their plan. It was a race against time, against Van's forces, against the very fabric of reality itself. As the Nexus began to hum with power, responding to their guidance, Jax realized how thin the line was between success and failure. Every decision they made, each keystroke and calculation, was another step along a knife edge that could either save them or doom them all. But for once, human unpredictability was on their side. It was the wild card in a game where the stakes had never been higher, and as the Nexus's energy stabilized, Jax felt a flicker of hope. Van's forces might have the firepower, but they didn't have what Jax and Naya did: the audacity to believe in the impossible. The lab was alive with energy, each readout and display reflecting the delicate balance they were trying to maintain. It was a tapestry of chaos and order, interwoven in a way that only they could truly understand. And as they worked, Jax couldn't help but feel a sense of camaraderie with Naya, with Captain Reeve, even with the grim-faced Counselor Hatton. They were united in their struggle, fighting not just for survival but for the future of humanity itself. The final moments were a blur, a whirlwind of calculations and adjustments, each one crucial to their success. And as the Nexus's energy peaked, as it stabilized under their guidance, Jax felt the weight of the world lift, if only for a moment. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd managed to pull off the impossible. But as the adrenaline began to fade, as the reality of their situation reasserted itself, Jax knew that the fight was far from over. Van was still out there, his ambition unchecked, and the universe was still as unpredictable as ever. But for now, they'd bought themselves a reprieve, a chance to regroup and plan their next move. And as Jax leaned back in his chair, exhausted but triumphant, he couldn't help but smile. Because in the end, it wasn't just chaos that had saved them, but the unpredictable, indomitable spirit of humanity itself. "Here's to unpredictability," Jax said, raising an imaginary glass. Naya chuckled, joining in the toast. "May it continue to surprise us." And as the lab settled into a momentary peace, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Because in a universe teetering on the brink of chaos, sometimes all you had was each other. And that, as far as Jax was concerned, was enough. "Hey, Jax," Naya called, her voice slicing through the white noise of the lab like a scalpel through a days-old corpse. "I think I've found something." Jax looked up from his terminal, where he'd been contemplating whether the blinking cursor might be trying to communicate in Morse code. Its message, he suspected, was probably, "You're screwed." "Please tell me it's not another existential crisis," he said, rolling his chair over to her station. "I'm fresh out of bourbon." Naya gestured to her screen, where graphs wiggled in a way that suggested they were about to start a Kangal line. "Look at this. It's a pattern." Jax squinted at the data. "It looks like a toddler's attempt at modern art." "Yeah, but it's our toddler," Naya replied, eyes gleaming with the kind of dangerous optimism that usually precedes catastrophic failure. "These fluctuations, they're not random. There's a cadence to them. We might be able to predict the Nexus's outbursts." "Great, so the universe is an angsty teenager with a mood ring. How do we use this to not die horribly? We exploit it. Turn human unpredictability into our weapon. If we can sync our actions with these fluctuations, we might stabilize the Nexus long enough to make Van's plan implode like my last relationship." Jax leaned back, the creaky chair voicing its protest. "So, we ride the chaos wave and hope we don't wipe out. Sounds like a plan." Naya grinned, and Jax couldn't help but grin back. "You know what this means, right?" he said. "We need a team of people crazy enough to follow us into this. Like finding a needle in a haystack in the middle of a supernova," Naya noted. "Yeah, but needles are sharp and pointy just like us." Jax stood, slapping a hand to his chest in mock seriousness. "Let's rally the unhinged." The mess hall was the kind of place that could make a cafeteria lady cry tears of joy or horror. Jax and Naya had appropriated a corner booth, where they could survey the potential recruits, scientists, engineers, and a few individuals whose sanity was questionable at best. "Perfect." Naya tapped her comm link, and a hologram of Dr. Tessa Fern flickered to life on the table. Fern was known for making quantum mechanics look like child's play and for her laugh that could shatter glass. "You rang?" she asked, eyebrows arched with enough skepticism to form a bridge to another galaxy. "We've got a plan," Naya said. "We need someone crazy enough to build a quantum stabilizer on the fly." Fern's eyes lit up, the gleam of someone who'd never met a terrible idea she didn't love. "Count me in. Worst case, we all die and I get to be right one last time." "Fantastic," Jax replied, crossing Fern's name off their list. "Next up, we need some muscle." The table shuddered as Bruno, a man built like a brick wall with a personality to match, dropped into the seat beside Jax. "Heard you're looking to do something stupid," Bruno said, voice like gravel in a blender. "I'm in," Naya nodded. "Great. We need someone to keep Van's goons off our backs while we save the universe. You interested?" Bruno grunted in a way that Jax assumed was affirmative. "As long as I get to break something." "Deal," Jax said. "We'll throw in a sledgehammer if you're good." The recruitment drive continued, each new addition adding a different shade to their patchwork crew. By the time they were done, They had enough expertise, brawn, and sheer lunacy to make even the most optimistic strategist reconsider their career choices. Jax looked around the table, a motley assortment of problem solvers and problem creators, all with the same look, desperation mixed with the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, this crazy plan might work. "All right, listen up," Jax announced, tapping the holographic display to bring up the Nexus's schematics. "We've got a shot at turning the Nexus's unpredictability into our biggest asset. Here's how we're going to do it." 3 hours later, the lab was a hive of controlled chaos, or just chaos. It was hard to tell the difference sometimes. Jax moved between workstations like a conductor directing an orchestra where every musician played a different song. "Fern, you've got that stabilizer ready yet?" he called over the din. "If by ready you mean might explode, then yes," Fern shouted back. She was elbow-deep in wires, her enthusiasm undampened by the smell of something burning. Naya was at the central terminal, eyes darting between streams of data like a gambler on a losing streak. "We're close, but we need to sync up with the Nexus's next cycle," she said. "Timing's everything." "No pressure then," Jax replied, wiping sweat from his brow with a sleeve already stained with coffee and grease. "Bruno status?" The big man was adjusting the defensive turrets they'd rigged from scrap parts in sheer optimism. "Locked and loaded. Anyone tries to crash this party, they're getting a face full of nope." "Perfect," Jax said, a thrill of excitement or possibly terror tingling down his spine. This was it, the point of no return. He turned to Naya, who was watching him with the kind of intensity reserved for bomb defusal and blind dates. "You ready for this?" "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing around them. "Let's show the universe what unpredictability really means." They began the sequence, hands flying over controls with a speed that would make a cheetah question its life choices. The Nexus responded, its energy spiking in reaction to their inputs, a dance of chaos and order that would make a physicist weep. Jax felt the lab quiver as the stabilization field engaged, the air humming like the world's angriest tuning fork. "Hold it steady," he shouted, sweat pouring down his face. "Naya, what's the readout?" "We've got alignment," she yelled back, a wild grin on her face. "The Nexus is stabilizing," but just as the words left her mouth, alarm screamed, a cacophony that could only mean one thing: Van's forces had arrived. Bruno swung into action, activating the turrets as Fern muttered a prayer to whatever quantum deity might be listening. "Look sharp, folks," Jax called, adrenaline surging. "Van's boys are here for the party." Outside, the hum of engines and the clatter of weapons formed a cruel symphony. Bruno's turrets roared to life, spitting fire and defiance at the approaching threat. Jax spared a glance at the readouts. The Nexus was still holding, its stability a fragile thread of hope. "Keep it together." Naya's voice cut through the chaos, a lifeline in the storm. "We're almost there." Jax adjusted the stabilizer's inputs, his mind a flurry of calculations and half-formed prayers. "Come on, you cosmic bastard," he muttered under his breath. "Just give us this one." The lab shuddered under the onslaught, a dance of light and dark as Bruno's defenses held the line. But they couldn't hold forever. Their salvation relied on precision, on timing, on the very unpredictability they were trying to harness. Jax's fingers flew across the controls, a blur of motion as he guided the Nexus through its chaotic dance. "Naya, how's our power?" "Running on fumes," she replied, her hands steady, eyes locked on the data. "But we're still in it." "Just a little longer." The lights flickered, the lab's energy reserves nearing their limit. Jax felt the pressure mounting, the weight of a universe balancing on the edge of a knife. One slip, one misstep, and they'd be nothing more than a cautionary tale. But they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. Jax glanced at Naya, the determination in her gaze mirroring his own. "Let's finish this," he said, voice firm despite the chaos swirling around them. With a shared nod, they executed the final sequence, the culmination of their work, their hopes and desperation. The Nexus responded, its energy peaking in a crescendo of light and sound. For a moment, everything hung in the balance, the universe holding its breath as they straddled the line between success and disaster. And then, like a cosmic sigh of relief, the Nexus stabilized, its energy harmonizing with their inputs, a dance of chaos brought to heel by sheer audacity. "We did it!" Naya shouted, disbelief and triumph warring in her voice. "Jax, we actually did it!" Jax let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, a laugh bubbling up despite the madness. "Against all odds, huh? Maybe unpredictability not so bad after all." But as the lab settled into an uneasy peace, Jax knew the fight wasn't over. Van was still out there, licking his wounds and plotting his next move. And the universe, unpredictable as ever, wouldn't grant them respite for long. For now, though, they'd won. They'd taken the chaos and turned it into their greatest ally, proving that sometimes, just sometimes, insanity was the best strategy. Jax turned to his team, a collection of eccentrics and misfits who'd somehow pulled off the impossible. "Here's to unpredictability," he said, raising an imaginary toast. The others joined in, laughter echoing through the lab, a sound of relief, of victory, of the indomitable human spirit. Because in a universe that thrived on chaos, sometimes the only way to survive was to embrace it. And Jax, Naya, and their ragtag band had done just that, proving once again that when it came to unpredictability, humanity was second to none. The atmosphere in the lab was so tense you could cut it with a spoon. A rusty one at that, because nothing in this place ever worked right. Jax Cormorant and his ragtag team were at the precipice of either monumental success or cataclysmic failure, a balance that seemed to be the universe's favorite joke. Bruno was still at his post by the turrets, his face set in an expression that could have been mistaken for constipation, but was actually his serious face. "Van's goons are still knocking," he grumbled, eyes scanning the monitors with the vigilance of a hawk on caffeine. "They're persistent little bastards, I'll give them that." Jax gave a half-hearted nod, more focused on the squiggly lines dancing across his screen, the Nexus fluctuating like it was drunk on its own power. "Yeah, well, persistence is great until it gets you killed. Let's hope they lean into that." Naya was at her usual spot, smack dab in the eye of the storm, fingers flying across the terminal like a concert pianist on a sugar high. "We're still synced with the Nexus," she called out, optimism threading through her voice with the delicacy of a bomb diffuser singing a lullaby. "For now, Doctor." Tessa Fern popped her head up from under a mess of cables, something sparking ominously behind her. "I've got the stabilizer on standby. It's ready to either save the day or become a cautionary tale told to future generations." "We're not planning a funeral just yet," Jax replied, a wry grin tugging at his lips despite the chaos. He tapped a few more keys, the Nexus responding with a burst of energy that lit up the room in a symphony of blinding lights and groaning metal. "Naya, what's our window?" "About as long as a politician's promise," she shot back, her gaze intense as she monitored the erratic pulse of their cosmic frenemy. "So move it." The lab shuddered again, the battle outside ebbing and flowing like a sea of aggression and bad temper. Bruno let the turrets rip a fresh cacophony, each shot a resounding declaration of "not today," pal aimed at Van's persistent lackeys. "What's life without a little uncertainty?" Jax said, the rhetorical question hanging in the air like a bad smell no one wanted to claim. Fern snorted, yanking on a wire with practiced nonchalance. "Boring and overrated. Let's kick this thing where it counts." Naya started the sequence, the Nexus data streaming before her like the universe's most confounding puzzle. She knew how to piece it together, or at least hoped she did. "We're in the final stretch," she announced, tension and adrenaline battling for dominance in her voice. "Everyone ready, as I'll ever be," Jax answered, his hands moving with a speed and precision born out of equal parts desperation and genius. "Let's dance with the cosmic devil and see who steps on whose toes." Bruno's comlink crackled, an unfortunate reminder that the universe was indeed a jerk. "Got some bad news," he said, his voice a gravelly concern. "Van's got a blockade on the perimeter. Looks like they're packing some serious heat." "Well, isn't that just peachy?" Jax said with faux cheerfulness. "Naya, any bright ideas? We can use the Nexus's fluctuations against them," she suggested, her mind already mapping out the chaos. "It's unpredictable enough to throw their systems off, but we'll have to time it just right." "So, no pressure then," Fern quipped, her hands flying over her console as she made last-minute adjustments. "I love a good high-stakes game of chicken with the cosmos." Jax glanced at the readouts, the data a chaotic dance of numbers and predictions that could mean salvation or disaster. "All right, folks, this is it. We need to channel all that lovely unpredictability right at Van's blockade." "You got it, boss," Bruno grumbled, his fingers clenching around the turret controls like he was holding onto his last scrap of sanity. The lab pulsed with energy as they initiated the sequence. Jax's fingers were a blur, guiding the Nexus's chaotic power into a focused storm aimed squarely at their enemies. "Hold it together, people. We're almost there." The Nexus responded to their efforts, its power surging like an angry tide. Outside, Van's blockade shuddered, systems flickering under the onslaught of calculated unpredictability. Jax could almost hear the collective cursing of Van's forces as their tech betrayed them. "Bruno, light them up," Jax ordered, his voice a command wrapped in dark humor. "Let's give him something to remember us by." Bruno obliged, and the lab shook with the force of their defiance, the turrets roaring to life. Outside, the blockade staggered under the combined assault, the Nexus's chaos making mincemeat of their defenses. "Looks like unpredictability working wonders," Fern commented, a manic gleam in her eyes as she watched the readouts. "Maybe we should patent it." "Yeah, we'll call it chaos therapy," Jax replied, focusing on the task at hand. "Guaranteed to mess up your day unless you're us." The lab settled into a tense rhythm, the team riding the waves of chaos with a determination that bordered on insanity. Jax's focus was razor-sharp, every fiber of his being committed to holding their precarious balance. Outside, the battle raged, the universe's inherent madness playing in their favor for once. Van's forces were in disarray, their systems overwhelmed by the unpredictable assault. Naya's voice cut through the noise, a calming presence amidst the storm. "We're stabilizing," she confirmed, her hand steady on the controls. "The Nexus is holding." Jax let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, relief mingling with triumph in his chest. "We've done it," he said, disbelief and pride coloring his words. "But don't get too comfortable," Bruno warned, ever the realist. "Van's still out there and he's not the forgiving type." Jax nodded, his gaze sweeping over their makeshift command center. "We've bought ourselves time. Let's make sure we use it wisely." Fern gave a satisfied nod, her exuberance tempered by the scars of hard-won experience. "I knew we'd pull it off. Just had a feeling." "Amazing what a little human unpredictability can achieve," Naya said, a smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe chaos is our secret weapon after all." Jax leaned back, exhaustion catching up with him in a rush. "Here's to unpredictability," he said, raising an imaginary glass once more. "Our best friend and worst enemy all rolled into one." The others joined him in the gesture, their laughter mingling with the hum of the Nexus. A sound of victory, of defiance, of humanity's indomitable spirit. In a universe that thrived on chaos, they'd embraced it and made it their own, proving once again that when it came to unpredictability, humanity was unrivaled. But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Van would be back, and the universe wasn't about to let them rest on their laurels. For now, though, they'd won a crucial battle, and their triumph was all the sweeter for the madness that had led them there. Jax turned to his team, a group of misfits and eccentrics who'd defied the odds and come out on top. "Let's keep this going," he said, his voice carrying the weight of determination and hope. Because in a cosmos that thrived on unpredictability, they'd become masters of chaos, and they were just getting started. The lab was finally quiet, a rare moment of peace after the storm. It felt unnatural, like silence in the middle of a battlefield, a warning that the universe was just biding its time before launching another assault on their sanity. Doctor, Jack's cormorant surveyed the mess they'd made, the debris of their desperate efforts strewn across the lab like the aftermath of a really bad party. The Nexus, still pulsing with raw energy, was stable for now. It hummed softly, as if chuckling at the humans' frantic attempts to tame it. Jax leaned against a terminal, feeling the exhaustion seep into his bones. Well, that was fun, he deadpanned, wiping sweat and probably some grease from his brow. Remind me never to do it again. Naya Quora, ever the optimist or perhaps just a glutton for punishment, shot him a smirk. You say that every time, and yet here we are. Masochism, thy name is Cormorant, he chuckled, a dry sound that hinted at their shared history of improbable survival. True, but even a broken clock is right twice a day. Maybe we finally got it right this time. Naya tapped her fingers against the terminal, watching the data scroll by. The Nexus is holding for now. Seems like our chaotic friend here decided to play nice. Miracles do happen, Jax replied, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Either that or the universe is just setting us up for a bigger punchline. Doctor, Tessa Fern emerged from behind a stack of equipment, looking like she'd been wrestling with a live octopus. If the universe is a comedian, it's the type that laughs at its own jokes, she said, dusting off her hands. And we're the punchline. Bruno, still at his post, chimed in through the comms. As long as Van's not laughing, I'll take it as a win. Speaking of Van, Jack said, his expression sobering. He won't take this lying down. We've bought time, sure, but not forever. Forever's overrated, Naya interjected, her voice bright despite the heavy topic. Look at immortality. Everyone wanted it, now it's just a way to prolong existential crises. Yeah, live forever only to spend eternity worrying about your next malfunction, Jax agreed, shaking his head. The only thing more persistent than immortality. The universe's sense of humor. Captain Reeves' hologram flickered to life on the comm terminal, looking none too pleased. Looks like you pulled it off, Cormorant, he said, his voice a blend of admiration and exasperation. I'm not sure whether I should thank you or court-martial you. Jax grinned, the expression more of a grimace. I'll take a thank you if it's all the same. Court-martials are so last century. Reeves snorted, his image crackling slightly with static. Fair enough. Just keep that Nexus in one piece. We've got enough on our plate without dealing with cosmic temper tantrums. As long as Van doesn't crash the party again, we're good, Naya piped up, fingers still flying over the terminal as she ran diagnostics. Good luck with that, Reeves said, his hologram beginning to fade. I'll keep you posted on the situation outside. Reeve out. Jack sighed, letting the sound carry the weight of every impossible task they'd survived. Well, at least we're not dead, yet. High praise indeed, Naya said with a mock salute. From the brink of disaster to the edge of slightly less disaster, Tessa snorted, a grin breaking through her earlier fatigue. Welcome to life with Cormorant. Always a roller coaster, never a dull moment. Speaking of which, Jack said, turning to face the team. We need to figure out our next move. The Nexus is stable but not invulnerable. We need to ensure it stays that way. Naya nodded, her expression thoughtful as she considered the data. We could use the Nexus's fluctuations as a predictive model. If we analyze its patterns, we might be able to anticipate future instability. Like predicting when the next cosmic joke is gonna land, Bruno asked, his voice carrying a hint of skepticism. Exactly, Jax replied, his mind already racing ahead. We can't stop the universe from being unpredictable, but maybe we can get ahead of it. Sounds like a plan, Tessa agreed, her hands moving deftly over her console. And if it doesn't work, we can always blame the Nexus. Blame the universe, Jax corrected, a wry smile tugging at his lips. It's a bigger target. Naya chuckled, the sound brightening the lab's dim atmosphere. Good thing humanity's always been good at punching above its weight. Jax nodded, an unspoken camaraderie passing between them. And even if we get knocked down, we get back up, because ultimately that's what makes us human. Tessa raised an imaginary glass, echoing Jax's earlier gesture. To unpredictability and the chaos it brings. Our greatest foe and our best ally. The others joined in, their voices mingling in a shared toast to their continued survival. In a universe that thrived on chaos, they'd embraced it and made it their own. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving, one impossible challenge at a time. Ior's passed, the lab a hive of activity as they worked to reinforce the Nexus's stability. Jax and Naya pored over data, their minds synced in a way only forged through shared trials and mutual respect. Tessa continued to monitor the stabilizer, her focus as unwavering as ever. Bruno kept a watchful eye on their defenses, ever vigilant against the threat of Van's return. The hum of the Nexus provided a constant backdrop, its energy a reassuring presence amidst the chaos. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if humanity could pull off another miracle. "Hey, Jax," Naya called, breaking the silence. "You ever think about what comes after all this? Once we've got the Nexus under control." Jax paused, considering her question. "I try not to think too far ahead. The universe usually has other plans. Suppose we manage to stabilize the Nexus permanently," Naya continued, undeterred. "What do you think that means for all the immortality tech tied to it?" He shrugged, a casual gesture that belied the complexity of the issue. "Who knows? Maybe immortality becomes more than just a fancy way to delay the inevitable. Maybe it becomes a part of our future for better or worse. Or maybe it just gives people more time to screw things up," Bruno muttered, ever the pessimist. Jax laughed, the sound genuine this time. "Probably, but that's humanity for you, always finding new ways to make a mess." Naya grinned, her optimism undimmed, "and new ways to clean it up. We're nothing if not resourceful and stubborn," Tessa added with a smirk. "A dangerous combination," Jax nodded, a sense of pride welling up within him. "And that's why we're still here, because when the universe throws chaos our way, we throw it right back, with interest." Bruno chuckled, the sound rich with camaraderie. "Here's hoping the universe gets the message. We're not going anywhere." Jax glanced around at his team, a ragtag group of eccentrics who'd become his family. They'd faced down impossible odds and come out stronger for it. In a universe that thrived on unpredictability, they'd proven that humanity wasn't just a part of the chaos, it was the chaos. As the lab settled into a rhythm of cautious optimism, Jax allowed himself a moment to reflect. They'd come a long way, but the journey was far from over. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like a future worth fighting for. Because in the end, that's what made them human. Not just their ability to adapt and survive, but their relentless determination to keep moving forward, to keep striving for something better. To take the chaos and turn it into a symphony of human triumph. Jax Cormorant, surrounded by his unlikely allies, couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. In a universe that thrived on chaos, they'd carved out their own place, a testament to human resilience and the power of unpredictability. And that, he thought with a wry smile, was something worth toasting to. "Here's to us," he said, raising an imaginary glass once more. "And to whatever madness comes next." The others joined him, their laughter a defiant chorus against the cosmic uncertainty. In that moment, they were more than just survivors. They were dreamers, standing on the precipice of the unknown, ready to take on whatever the universe had in store. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to make it their own.